I'm definitely having an interesting time with my YouTube videos, but I just wanted to make a little short one. I had to pass the Google Stasi test of verifying my number with the phone because my videos were too long. Anyway, this is going to be a short one. What I talked about in one of my other videos earlier, the one that I just started to get excited about, I didn't plan any of this, was the fact that people are owned. This is actually quite a hard concept to understand, but when you understand it, it's pretty factual. See, people say no one owns me. Oh, my boss doesn't own me. My family doesn't own me. If I wanted to do this, I could. The thing is, if you're a cute, yummy girl, you're probably sort of at the lower end of the social spectrum in regards to how all of this works. But you are owned. Ownership is basically fragmented and distributed amongst the owning class. The owning class constitutes the government, who basically are a number for every one of the people that they own, whether that's your national insurance number, your social security number, whatever, telephone number, passport number. They own you. That is how they own you. Or you're owned by your employers and your social structure. And the social structure is the most intriguing because that basically, you think, how could the social structure possibly own me? Well, what a lot of people don't realise is that the social hierarchy, as it goes higher, is a social hierarchy of people that own other people. And these will be friends, and you'll say, oh, I know who you're talking about. It's that friend that has lots of friends. We quite often go around to that friend's place. He's quite popular, and lots of people go around to that friend's place. They're the ones that have the barbecues or the parties. You can start to abstract that because that friend does not come to your barbecue or your party. You go to their party. Now, it's a fluid and dynamic situation. You might have a few of these people. They're probably at maybe the same level, and so you might find that you're going around to their party or another person's party, or maybe someone else's party. So you might go around and find someone's party, and sometimes people might come to your party. But at the end of the day, it's a bit like musical chairs. When the music stops, you're going to their party. They're not coming to yours. And they have a list of 30 people that they can call up at any point to come to their party. And as they get older, their party will get smaller. It will not be a party, it might be just afternoon tea. You know, and it's a fluid, dynamic, and complex structure, but it's a structure of ownership. These people actively played a role of initiating social gatherings and events, and each people in that list is essentially owned by those people. That, you know, that they are the assets which get drawn to the social events. I mean, you might think, well, they're helping you. Well, yeah, they are helping you, but you're helping them more so. Now, if you were to sort of consider it this way, there's a bottom to every social structure, every social network. There's someone that's at the top, the most popular person, and then there's someone at the bottom. Now, the person at the bottom plays a fairly important role. No one really wants to know them, no one really finds them very interesting, but whilst they're there, the person next up is not at the bottom. So they are up in the hierarchy. And this is where it sort of gets interesting. If you were like me, and you were at the bottom of the social structure, and the sort of person that, you know, they always say, oh, it's really good to see you, and laughs at what you say, and when you take your patronage away, suddenly the other person is at the bottom, and that hurts them because they're no longer someone, they are now no one. And this social structure goes on a lot further, to the sense that if everyone didn't go to that person's party, that person that maybe has, a pretty big house, they've got a nice big reception room for a nice big party with a nice big garden with a nice swimming pool maybe, that is really convenient, unlike your scazzy little flat where you couldn't swing a cat, where it's in a bit of a dodgy area. I mean, who'd want to really go to a party there? Without you and the other modern dwellers in this equation, they don't actually have the social fabric and structure to have their parties. Now, it's not all about parties. I'm just using that as a particular analogy. It could be anything. It could be just a club. It could be, a school event. Mums going round, and it's exactly the same thing. The mums all go around and they have their cups of tea, and they have a little bus network where they all pick up the kids or whatever. But as soon as the bottom sort of falls out of that, it starts to collapse. And it's when you start to consider things like that these people, they don't want you just dropping out of their social structure, because you play an important role in maintaining and then elevating their social ranking. I mean, for example, office party, and the person that owns and controls the office party, you hear the mice nibbling away at the bloody structure of the house. If you consider the role of the manager of the office party, you keep stopping when I stop. Basically, I know you're there. Me, 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 me. He knows I'm talking to him. If you consider their role, they basically own that party, and it's a social ranking. They get to control people's futures at parties. Whether you actually even get invited. I don't get invited. Never got invited. They would have them, and I wouldn't get invited. And who you meet, who you propagate with, who you breed with, who your world becomes involved with, and they will engineer the multicultural parties, the multi-ability parties, where you will, in theory, get chummy with the people you'll be friends with for the rest of your life. These people, they need that control. They own those people for those abstract conditions and processes. Now, they also need you to work in their businesses, your assets. Without the party, their company, the structure loses a small degree of kudos, power. But without the actual employees, when you drop out of that, they've got no one left to stack their boxes, to clean their bins. They've got to start doing it themselves. The bottom falls out of the equation, and they can't have that degree of freedom. And that's actually, the people are owned. Now, the conditions of ownership are almost encrypted. They're encrypted in CVs. They're encrypted in dynamic structures and processes that allow employers to not to grasp people so much so that it looks as though they own them, so much so that it's clearly slavery. They can let them go. Their CVs, the structure is contained. You've got to say, what did you do on your CV? Well, I was an arsehole in an office. Oh, well, we've got plenty of openings for arseholes. And this allows the manager to consolidate their power in business and in social ranking by having uninterrupted periods of employment, so that they continue to pay down on their mortgage and reinforce their existence in suburbia, and to decimate the working person or the arsehole's ability to accumulate wealth, to engage in a stable social existence, and essentially to essentially create a form of slavery that is obtuse, that can't be seen. but it's clearly present in the sense that you suddenly you to even get into the working world, you've got to beg for an education, whereas most of these educations are of no value at all. In my experience, and I have a lot of vast experience in a broad spectrum of working environments, not through work, just through by being there, you do not need even the lowest degree of qualification to do a lot of the roles that are taken up. You need to learn how to control people. That's pretty much what it comes down to. But what I'm saying is, to get that degree, you've got to bow down to this social construct of what academia and what qualifications are all about. Sitting an exam, learning what you are told. You know, if you're doing economics, you will have to learn certain economic theories, and you have to learn them rote. Now, we all understand that. To pass your driving test, you have to learn how to pass the driving test academically, theoretically, looking in the mirrors, accelerating at such and speed. And we all know, as soon as you've got your driving license, you drive how you want, usually safely, you know. But the same is with academia. So we understand that, but it still doesn't get away from the fact that you've got to essentially put yourself in a position where you are already, to some extent, owned, but maybe not so much the word owned is at this stage, entry level. You are placed. So you suddenly become in finance. So that means you can't go into engineering. You can't go into medicine. You know. So if you want to get into wildlife reserve, you've got to have a degree in ecology, in geography, in wildlife management, just as examples. They're already controlling what you need to get in, and then you need to place yourself into that ecostructure, in that working ecostructure, and essentially you might find yourself on the winning end of the game of life, where you become the manager, you find that you're successful, but largely you will find that when you come to move, you don't have the exact freedom. You will then say, okay, well, here's my CV. I did a degree in ecological management, and I got now 3 years, and now I'm really hoping that this, both the qualifications and now the 3 years experience, makes me suitable for this other job. Now, what people don't understand truly, especially in that early period, 14 to 30, say for example, is that to get that job that they are now looking for, that required the government sanctioned degree in ecological management and the 3 years experience, you don't need any experience, because when you do the job, you realise that all it means is going somewhere and feeding some ducks, cleaning some litter, and basically doing things that absolutely anyone could do. Anyone could do these roles without any of the qualifications or the experience. Now this, I was just an abstract example, but I've got so many clear examples from industry, core industry, you know, manufacturing, office work, you know, shipping, transport, consulting, and the actual processes that they carry out do not need any experience at all. But they will contrive this system of control that essentially makes slaves of people to their CV, this abstract form of indenture. So much so that you really need to make sure that your CV is up to date and up to speed. Otherwise, you're not going to get any further up the ladder in your career, in your chosen career. and then the only option from there on end is basically Hobson's choice of whatever's left. You know, and people will end up sort of developing a career at Walmart. You know, that's not a career. You know, and then going through the same process of getting 5 years experience on the tills so that they can get into perhaps supervisor role or something along those lines. So, I mean, essentially, the change of control are there to sort of to own people. So you can't, you know, you could move from, say, a Walmart position to in Florida to a Walmart position in Texas, but this is where these people, the owners, they have abstracted and distributed the concept of people ownership, because for every person that moves from Florida to Texas, there'll be a person that moves from Texas to Florida. Supply and demand will still work in those areas, but the people will still be constrained to their CV and to the enforced I know this word very well, expectations that people have. We know that a stack filler in Walmart will be getting X amount. We know that a call center operator will be getting X amount. There's no way you're going to suddenly find that if you go to Texas you're going to be getting 5 times what you're getting paid. But your manager probably is getting 5 times that payment, because they have abstracted that into their understanding, so they become the ruling class. And in between each other and in the hierarchy of systems, everyone supports that. So if you turn around and suddenly say, I don't want to stack shelves anymore, well, you know what? If everyone did that, there would be no people in Walmart to supply the food, and there would be riots because there would be no food. Now, the society wouldn't necessarily collapse because things would change. The management might suddenly start paying people more, but you know, things are so much so that the current state of things does not promote freedom. It reinforces slavery. I mean, I think that's pretty much the sort of the bottom line on, you know, the whole idea of ownership. Because you go to I don't know. I mean, I rack my brain time and time again to think of things that are not cliche in my own vocabulary. Just trying to think of other forms of employment, because there are millions. You know, you could be a newspaper reporter. The change in the hierarchy, it just goes on forever. You do not need any experience to write a news article. You don't need any experience, and I've seen them time and time again on the videos on the internet to present a news story. You just stand there and say, I saw Mrs. Miggins' cat today up a tree. You know, you just write an article. Most people do not even read them, and they do not. You know, you'd have to be pretty damned illiterate to fail that kind of task. Most people could write something that would pass, but you will be then asked if you want to become an article writer for your 10-year CV history of that. I mean, I know I do computing, and I used to get people saying, do you have 4.5 years of this type of coding? And they would say PHP 4.2. And when you're young, you get tied up in that. You sort of think, PHP 4.2, no, I've only got 1 year. Oh, I'm sorry, you need 4.5 years. You know what? Technology, things like that, they move so fast that people that insist on 4.5 years experience in anything like that, they're actually, I mean, they're actually pretty nasty people to sort of do things like that, to try and deny the fact that you don't need any experience to pretty much do anything, especially the higher up you go. You know, there are very few things, even microelectronics. You know, you can pretty much walk in there and you can pick the board up as it rolls. You would be surprised. You do need a little bit of intelligence to be able to do that sort of thing. But what you'll find is life is full of systems that are modularized and compartmentalized, so much so that you don't need a clear box. You can work with grey systems where you understand the inputs and the outputs that are required, and you can work along those lines. You don't need to understand the true workings of a 555 chip to understand timing mechanisms in, you know, integrated circuit technology. You know, you just need to understand you need a 555 chip here, and you need to understand logic and processing. And these are sort of things that are to some extent difficult, but even in the past, but more so in the present, these things are automated into the construct of working environments. So much such as, for example, if you were to take Photoshop, you can take a photo and you can expose it and you can do all sorts of things that you don't necessarily have any understanding of color gradients, for example, but you can still change, heat patterns in colors in photos. Logic circuits, you can throw them together and you can get them working because the computer systems will figure it out for you. The same with computer programming. I mean, you still need to understand how to do computer programming, but it will quite often do logic checking, which used to be called parsing, or I don't know, you used to compile a program. I mean, it used to be a lot harder, but at the same time, what people were required to do would be a lot smaller. So you would part of a team working on a small component of a large program where you would have your grey box in and out. And so all of this is basically reflects the structure of the control of ownership of people. And this is the thing, you see, so we're owned, everyone is owned like property by an abstract construct of your family. If you sort of, I'm going to go and do this, it's, well, what about your friends? They'll miss you. What about your family? I mean, the bottom line is family is one of the biggest scams of all. Family is one of the things that keeps people back from achieving anything because they're afraid they can't move. You are stuck in the town. Now, I'm not saying it's something, that is some kind of overriding detrimental feature, because family can give you a lot of support, and family can be the singular cause of your success. Having a strong family to go back to if you suddenly fail at something somewhere else. You might try and go to the city and then fail, and you can still come back to your family that will support you, and then you can go and try again. I don't know, but the whole concept of family, is a part and parcel of this ownership of people. You can't just say, okay, that's it. I've had enough of bringing this family up. I'm going to actually go to Spain and marry someone and have another family. Give it another go. I mean, you do have responsibilities when you have children and things like that, but the whole concept of family is just another subconscious and underlying mechanic behind the ownership of people, that people think, oh, I'm free, but they can't. They're not. So they're tied down by family. They're tied down by work. They're tied down by social structures. The parties. They're owned by the people that have the parties. They need to be there to go to the parties. People will become. So from my experience, this is abstract statement that I'm going to make now, but people are employed singularly so that they can perform their function in a society and a community. Employers are employing people almost abstractly to sustain them in their role in their community. This is why they don't like people leaving their community. This is what happens in places like Detroit. We have white flight. And so a lot of employers will be sort of saying, well, we're only going to employ you if you live in Detroit. If you suddenly move 200 miles to where all the white people live, we're not going to employ you anymore. Now, they're not saying it quite directly like that, but it'll be such that that's the way it will work. They are desperately trying to maintain people, but I think in Detroit it's completely reverse of what I'm really trying to say, because it's sort of happening. It's the same thing in any other town. You can look at, again, I'm always trying to think of just something different. San Francisco, maybe a little town 30 miles outside of San Francisco. They might employ people that work in the supermarket there, or maybe work in the post office depot. They don't want those people then moving maybe 200 miles away based on their wages, because it leaves a hole in the local community where that person was employed and became essentially a functioning element. So what I'm trying to say is people don't realise that there is no freedom. Now, there is some assumed freedom in other things. For example, when you're students, you can go and do student roles, and these student roles, it's assumed that you're going to move on and pass on. But you know, that's a sort of a bit of a different area, a bit of a